Thank you so much for bringing me here. And I'm so excited and thrilled to be here. So, this is Benjamin Kunkel. He is a novelist. He's a writer. Like a lot of writers around the world and across the country, Ben Kunkel is against AI. Here's how he put it. By the way, that's his novel. He's a brilliant novelist, I should say. I should point out he's a wonderful writer. His novel, Indecision, I really loved it. But against AI, I would say that's kind of the modal sentiment among writers, is to be against AI. Here's how he put it. Honestly, no one should sleep with anyone who uses AI. Perfectly put, like a true writer, harsh, blunt, direct and to the point, but also, I would say, a common sentiment. I would go so far as to say that is the modal sentiment among professional writers, is to be against AI, against anyone who uses AI. What does he mean? Let's break that down a little bit. When he says uses AI, what is in his mind? What is the scenario he envisions when he talks about being against AI? What he probably means is something like this. Hi, write a speech I can use for PopTech. Write it for me so I don't have to do the writing myself. And once you write it for me, I will pretend it's my own original work. I am guessing that that's the scenario he has in mind. I don't know specifically with him, but I will say most of the time when I talk to writers, when I was traveling around the world for OpenAI, talking to writers in the community, and they said, oh, I'm against AI. And I said, well, why? This is the scenario they would describe. Well, I just think there's something that's lost when we outsource the writing, the thinking, the creativity to AI. Totally agree. What he probably does not mean when he thinks that we should not use, as writers, as creative people, we should not use AI, he's probably not thinking about this use case. Now that I'm launching Socratic AI, I'm a bit worried about my finances. Can you help me hash out a budget? By the way, ChatGPT, very good at helping people hash out budgets. I'm guessing he's probably not against this. And I also don't think he's probably against a use case like this. Hi, ChatGPT, I need to write my speech for PopTech, but I'm feeling a little overwhelmed and I don't know where to start. Again, ChatGPT, very good at helping you with this kind of thing. Here's what it says. Totally understandable. It's a big moment. Here's my tips. Empathy, right? It's exactly what I need to hear in that moment. So clarify your core message. Try finishing the sentence. At PopTech, I want people to walk away understanding that blank. Oh, that's a good prompt. That gets me thinking. Sketch the arc before the words. Hook, idea, implications. Closing beat. Bring it full circle at the end. Choose a starting point. This is helpful, right? I am guessing he's probably not against this. When I talk to most writers and they tell me they're against AI and I talk about this, usually they say, okay, yeah, well that I have no problem with. That's fine. That's actually, I should probably try that. That's a good idea. Another novelist, Curtis Sittenfeld, wonderful writer, very funny. She wrote an article in the New York Times. Can you tell which short story ChatGPT wrote? This summer, I agreed to a literary experiment. We decided to hold a contest between ChatGPT and me to see who could write a better beach read, a breezy, fluffy, delightful trifle that you could read while lying on the beach, right? So this was the contest. Not surprisingly to me, Curtis Sittenfeld wrote a delightful and funny little short story about a guy she meets online on a dating app. And ChatGPT wrote a pretty bland, I would say, basically pointless, generic story. And so she was declared the winner. She triumphed over the machine, and she says, this was her takeaway, in human versus machine, at least for the time being, I'm still betting on people. She won the contest handily. She dominated. But here's my question to Curtis Sittenfeld. What is your point? Like, why? What is the value in framing AI as a competitor to humans? I mean, it's a classic trope, you know. There's John Henry, the man versus the steam drill. There's Sarah Connor versus the Terminator. There's every single episode of Black Mirror, right? Man versus machine. Yes, it's entertaining, but is that really the way we should be thinking about AI? Why not think about AI as a tool that can help us, including us, we creative people, we writers, we artists, do the work that we do? Somebody wrote in expressing the same sentiment that I had. This is a letter to the editor, Hank Weiss, Madison, Wisconsin. He says, a more illuminating experiment might explore how successful authors like Ms. Sittenfeld could use AI to enhance their creative process rather than viewing it as a competitor. Creativity in the digital age is not about what AI can do, but what we can do with AI. And that's the way I like to think about it. So I'll tell you why I'm here. I'm a writer, like Sarah said. I wrote for the New York Times. I wrote for Rolling Stone. I was an editor of Psychology Today, where I interviewed Dan Ariely. I have spent 10,000 hours, 20,000 hours honing my craft, and my whole life, really, the main thing I've always wanted is to try to become a better and better writer. And I will say that when ChatGPT came around, immediately, the first day that it dropped, I thought, oh, this is going to be so helpful. This is going to change everything for me. This is a miracle. I can't wait to start using this in my own creative process. But I will also say that it never occurred to me to use ChatGPT to generate writing for me instead of writing it myself. Why would I do that? What would be the point of that? I became a writer in the first place because I have ideas and insights that I think are pretty smart that I want to share with other people. I have emotions and feelings that I think are relatable, that I think other people would connect to, that I want to share with other people. I have stories about crazy, amazing things that have happened to me that I want to share. I want to tell those stories from my own experience, from my own memory. The last thing I would ever want to do is to have a machine, an LLM, try to guess and predict what I might want to say and then try to say it for me. I would never do that. So I would never generate writing with AI. So then why do I need ChatGPT at all? Why on the first day that it dropped did I think, oh, this is amazing. This is going to help me so much. Why? What's the point? Why do I need ChatGPT at all? And I will say the answer is that writing is hard. This is not a news headline that is novel to you guys. We all know this. It's hard to take something that's inside your own brain and makes sense to you, and then to put it into words is hard. To put it into words that make sense for somebody else, that somebody else finds clear and intelligible when they read it, that's difficult. If you then layer on an additional layer and say, okay, well, in addition to being clear and legible and comprehensible and to make sense to another person's brain, it should also be interesting, not boring, entertaining, maybe delightful, fun to read, funny. That's harder still, right? I don't know. For my case, it never comes out right the first time. My creative process is fits and spurts. There may be some writers, I'm sure there are some, who already have the perfectly honed creative process. Stephen King publishes 2 novels per year, so I'm guessing that the only way that's possible is that he wakes up every morning, sits down at his desk, and then the words just flow out of him easily and effortlessly, and he writes for hours and writes thousands of words, and he already has the perfect creative process. And for him, he doesn't need ChatGPT. It already works perfectly for him, right? But that's not me. It's not most of the writers that I talk to. For me, writing has never been a linear process where I just sit down and then write and just keep on writing until the piece or the story or the article is done. That's not how it works. The way writing works for me is I write a paragraph and I read it back and I think, that's pretty good. It's pretty good. And then I write a second paragraph and I think, that is not as good. And then I try to start writing a third paragraph and I think, oh wait, what should I say? Gosh, I'm stuck. Okay. And that moment is frustrating. It's difficult. It's aversive. And it's frustrating. In that moment, the temptation usually for me is I want to run away. It's so difficult that it's hard to stick with it in that moment. It makes me want to pick up my phone and doom scroll on Instagram or go binge Netflix or binge Haagen-Dazs or both at the same time, right? And when that happens, I might put my article down and walk away, and maybe I don't come back to it for a few hours or a few days. And so writing is not just difficult and solitary, but also inefficient. So in those moments when I would otherwise be tempted to do something else, to let go of writing and escape that aversive feeling, I think, oh, what if instead of doing that, instead of picking up Instagram and doom scrolling, what if instead at that moment, I turn to ChatGPT and I say, hi, okay, I'm writing something and I'm stuck. Okay. And then ChatGPT will say, great, let's get you unstuck. What's going through your mind? And I'll say, okay, well, I'm writing a speech, and I think in this moment, in the speech, in the flow, it's getting a little boring. It's getting a little dry, like it needs something. It needs something. Okay, well, what do you think it needs? That's ChatGPT. This is ChatGPT. What do you think it needs in this moment? I don't know. It needs something like, I don't know, like a joke or a moment of levity, or maybe like a really concrete example, or it could be like maybe a really personal, vulnerable story from my own life. Great. Do you have any stories in mind? Okay, do I have any stories in mind? Okay, good question. I mean, there is this one moment, right? And then it turns from me staring at the page and not knowing what to write to, transforms from that into a conversation. And so staring at the page and trying to write the next sentence when you don't know what to write, that's hard, right? But having a conversation where I try to say, okay, well, here's really what I'm trying to say. Here's the point I'm trying to make. And here's the different ways I could do it, with an example, with a story, with an anecdote, with a joke, right? With a study. That's a conversation that's a lot easier. Because as we all know, all of us in this room, as creative people, we know that the hardest part about writing is figuring out what to write, right? Because the way that we write is we don't just sit down and write one sentence after another, right? We don't look at our screen and type introduction and then write the perfect first sentence and the perfect second sentence and the perfect third sentence all the way until it's done. That's not how it works. That's why so much of the creative process is about figuring out what to write before you write it, right? We have brainstorming, we have outlining, we have beat sheets for screenwriters, we have this thing, a corkboard, where you put up differently sized Post-it notes and index cards to try to figure out the sequence of what you're going to write. Filmmakers have, that's a beat sheet. Filmmakers have a storyboard. One of my favorite examples is, this is Jerry Seinfeld. He does it not with outlining, but with yellow legal pads. He figures out what the jokes are going to be before he starts writing them. By the way, up there on the top left, that says Pop-Tart, not PopTech, Pop-Tart. That's a totally different kind of speech. My favorite example, I think, comes from Spike Lee. Example by which I mean example of figuring out what you write before you write it. I saw this movie, Do the Right Thing. It really inspired me. I thought, how does he come up with this? This is amazing. So I went out and I bought the screenplay. It comes in a book form. And I was interested to see that the first page of that book is not the first page of the screenplay. In other words, the first sentence that Spike Lee wrote when he wrote Do the Right Thing was not interior radio station storefront day. That wasn't the first thing he wrote. The first 30 pages of this book, if you buy the Do the Right Thing screenplay and book, the first 30 pages are his journal, are his yellow legal pad musings as he figures out and hashes out and has a conversation with himself about what the story is going to be before he even starts writing the first page of the script. This is what it looks like. My movie will be set on the hottest day of summer in Brooklyn, New York. Everybody's outside on hot summer nights. No one stays in their apartments. Examining racial tensions and how the hot weather only makes them worse. These tensions mount, then something happens outside or inside of the pizza parlor that triggers a major incident. This is him figuring out what to write before he writes it. To me, the ultimate way, the ultimate technique or method of figuring out what to write so that you can know what to write, so that you're not facing that blank page problem, is the writer's room, right? A bunch of screenwriters get together in a room that is sponsored by the TV studio, and they pitch each other ideas, and I don't know, they improvise scenes, and somebody writes something and says, hey, what do you think of this? And the other person reacts to it, and they hash it out, and they have a conversation with each other about what to write before they actually write the script, right? That's the ultimate, to me, way to figure out what to write before you write it. But I don't have a writer's room. I don't have one of those, so how do I do it? What I do is I turn to ChatGPT or Claude, and I use that as my writer's room. I pitch an idea. I say, hi, I have an idea for a screenplay. Here's the premise. It's a mafia movie along the lines of The Godfather or Goodfellas. Protagonist is a woman. She marries a young man who she soon learns is a foot soldier in a mafia crime empire. Unlike a traditional mafia movie, the entire story is told from the wife's point of view. A pivotal early scene that I have in my mind is she has to get the blood stains out of her husband's clothes, presumably after he's murdered someone. As the story goes on, it turns out that although her husband is good to her, she's much more intelligent than he is. She plays 3D chess. She sees the big picture. She sees many moves ahead. She understands the entire system. She supports him, and through her cunning and her brilliant strategic mind, he rises through the ranks and becomes the head of the massive crime empire. By the end of the movie, she's controlling the whole thing. He's the figurehead, but she's the mastermind. Okay, just a random idea that I had. This was me actually dictating with my phone to Claude, and Claude says, this is a fantastic premise. It's got real potential to be something special. By the way, that encouragement is also helpful. It also, right, if it said, well, I don't know, yeah, it didn't hook me, then that's not helpful. But seeing something, the seed of some potential, maybe, and saying it has the potential to be something special. What I love about it, the blood washing scene. The intelligence asymmetry is your secret weapon. Traditional mafia movies focus on loyalty, violence, and male codes of honor. By making her the strategic mind, you're exploring a different kind of power, Lady Macbeth or Livia Soprano. And then it asks me some questions. Hey, Jay, some things to consider. Her motivation. Why doesn't she leave? What does this world give her that she couldn't get elsewhere? The ending. Does she triumph? Does she pay a price? Is there a reckoning? This is helpful. This is my writer's room. So this is me trying to challenge the assumption that I think a lot of people have that if you're a writer, the main way, the default way that you would use AI would be to generate writing for you so that you don't have to do it yourself. And more generally, I want to challenge this framing, this assumption, this way of seeing AI as outsourcing. Hey, AI is here so that I can outsource something, the writing, the thinking, the creativity. Hey, do this for me so I don't have to work as hard. I can be a little lazy and then it does the thing for me. No, I don't like that. I don't want that. What I suggest is a reframe where instead we think of AI as a Socratic questioner, something that helps us surface our own best ideas and pushes us to do our best work. Maybe we're working harder than we were before. Maybe it's like peak performance. It's like a coach coaching an athlete. If you have a coach, you don't work less hard, you work harder because it's pushing you and asking you questions, asking you to clarify your ideas and think more deeply. So when I was at OpenAI, my job was writing community ambassador, and this was my whole message, that we should think of AI not as something that does something for us, but as something that helps us do our own best work. So it's entirely premised on the idea of flipping the script. The word that came to me was Socratic, right? Flipping the script, and by the way, that's also the name of my company. So flipping the script using AI as this Socratic questioner. Instead of giving me answers, I ask questions and it's an answer generating machine or a prose generating machine. No, instead, it's asking me the questions and I'm answering them. So that's the reframe. Instead of asking AI to be creative, we ask AI to help us be creative. So I have a prompt. We're going to get into this more for anybody who comes to my interactive session. The idea, this process is called reverse interviewing or Socratic AI, right? So if you go to this page, I guess don't go there now, but it's socraticai.co/PopTech. There's a prompt. There's an example of a Socratic prompt that looks something like this. Help me think of an entertaining story I can tell the people I meet at PopTech. A true story from my life that's cinematic, emotional, meaningful, and helps people understand who I am and what I care about. Ask me a series of 10 questions, one at a time, to help me remember a moment when I was challenged or moved or changed. So that's the reframe. Instead of AI as a question answering machine, AI as a thinking partner, as a coach, as an interviewer, as a questioner, to push me to be more creative and help me surface my own best ideas and take them further than I could otherwise. ChatGPT gave me the advice to try to bring it back around, to come full circle. So Sarah brought me on and Sarah brought me here. Sarah is why I'm here. And like I said, she was our featured performer when we were running things like the talk at CS50 about AI and writing. And she was also, I also featured her on the OpenAI blog, where I featured 5 professional writers and how each of them used AI in their creative process, never to generate writing, but as a thesaurus to help find the right words, or to do research as a research assistant, or as an interviewer and a coach to try to push you to be more creative. And so from that article that we published on OpenAI.com, here's a quote about, I talked about writing being lonely, that moment of the dark night of the soul where you're like, oh, I'm so frustrated. And it's just me by myself in a room trying to figure it out. I wish I had a writer's room. Here's Sarah addressing that point. What's amazing to me is I do not have writer's block anymore, like truly. I think writer's block is the feeling of solipsism, is the feeling of being totally alone. And I don't feel alone anymore because of this tool. Oh. So here's my parting prompts to you all. I would like you to think about this question. What can you achieve with the help of AI that you couldn't achieve without it? So thank you for having me. This is me. Come and find me. Come to my interactive. I would love to hear from you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Have any of the unions come out with a policy or recommendations about how AI should work for their members?
That's an interesting question. Have any of the unions come out with recommendations for how AI should work for their members? I basically don't know the answer to that. I'm the wrong person to speak on it, but I do know that there was a writer's strike with Hollywood screenwriters, and they had some concerns. They never wanted the studio to use AI to write a first draft and then hire a screenwriter and say, okay, well, we're not going to pay you the full writing fee because we already have a draft. Just do a rewrite where we can pay you much less. And there were, feared scenarios like that where the Hollywood screenwriters, you know, had some demands or some requests, and they won. But then I know that the resolution of that was that screenwriters themselves could use AI in their work, but the studios couldn't. I don't know if there were recommendations specifically about how they use it. I'm not sure.
One is so when I write, I end up going into lots of bad corners.
Yes.
And at the end of it, of spending an extra year on unnecessary bad corners, I know a lot more than the book. So the book is maybe could have been more efficient, but my
Yes.
wandering around and failing in all kinds of places means that I'm much better than the book.
Yes.
Because I know things that are not there, and I know why they're not there, and so on. And I worry a little bit about the process of being a little bit too efficient and not learning from going into bad corners. That's one question.
Yes.
What could we do to get people to make mistakes and learn through the process?
Will I answer that question first?
Sure.
So I won't forget it. So yeah, I love that. So writing, right? So we're talking about writing is not efficient. You are writing a book and you go into all these dead ends, or it's a wild goose chase, and you pursue a story or research a topic or read a series of studies or do a study, and it doesn't make it into the book. But maybe that process is valuable. I'm not saying it's not. I'm not saying that we should make writing into a hyper efficient assembly line well-oiled machine where you never, it's not supposed to be one sentence after another. You're supposed to do the exploration, right? Writing is a journey. You don't want to skip that journey. I would say, though, there are ways to get stuck and do something completely different, like me going and binging Haagen-Dazs and doom scrolling on Instagram, or there are ways to stick with it. And so if you can stick with it, I think that's the main thing. And you can stick with it in different ways. You can stick with it by writing the question in your yellow legal notepad and saying, okay, I am stuck. What should I write next? Possibilities, 1, 2, 3, and then fill out 50 possibilities to help you stay with it, right? Or you can do that with AI. But I think the main thing is to not flee, to not, part of my process, there's really a transformation in my process where my writing process always involved getting stuck, being so emotionally overwhelmed by the feeling of not knowing what comes next that I put it down and then I don't come back to it for a long time. That's not necessary, especially when the thing that I'm doing in the interim is completely unrelated to the book, right? I think what's helpful is having some way to stick with it, to stick with the topic at hand, and to not, go waste time. So the exploration, absolutely critical. Fully agree.
So in that regard, I think the interface should encourage that, because I think right now the interface is not encourage all of that. The second thing I have,
Yes.
my metaphor for this is painting, and there's something very magical about drawing and getting the feedback from the pencil to the hand to the eye. And for me, as I write more, I write slower and I'm enjoying it more. It's a bit like drinking, sipping wine, right? It becomes pleasurable. And again, I worry about this tension between efficiency and enjoying the process, because all of a sudden you have this efficient process. You can say, oh, I can get 600 words in this amount of time rather than 100. How do you give people these tools, but don't create this focus on efficiency and productivity and more words per hour?
Absolutely. I fully agree. The interface does fail to encourage that. Already the interface, if I say, hey, I wrote a first draft, help me with it, then the default thing that ChatGPT will say, okay, I rewrote it and tightened up the language and it rewrites it for you. I don't want that. So I'm always having to tell ChatGPT, hey, I wrote a first draft. Do not rewrite it for me. I'm the writer. Don't try to write for me. What are you, presumptuous, right? I'm gonna rewrite it, but give me feedback. Give me feedback as an editor and tell me what's working, what's not. which paragraphs are too vague, which paragraphs do I over-explain something, which paragraphs do I under-explain something, where is it getting boring, and then it gives me the feedback. I rewrite it myself, but that is not built into the interface. That's why I'm here to tell you, you need to have these prompts to tell it to do that, right? So fully agree. And I also agree that it shouldn't be just a streamlined and efficient process where we're writing and it's only typing and then it's all AI mediated. As a writer, I love other ways of coming up with ideas. I love going for a run and then stopping every 2 minutes to dictate into my phone my ideas that come to me when I'm writing, right? I love going to the coffee shop and not bringing my phone or my laptop with my special fountain pen, which I love, in my Japanese stationery, and writing longhand, because to me that somehow winds up bringing out a side of me. I think differently. It's a different side of creativity. And then I also do a draft with my laptop. And then I also do, and I also make sure to do both of those things before I even say to ChatGPT, okay, hey, I got as far as I could. I wrote something. I currently am not seeing a way to make it better. Now, can you look at it with fresh eyes as an outside perspective and tell me, what am I missing and how can this be better? And then it gives me feedback. So I do think it's critical to preserve and hold sacred the human side, the non-technology mediated side of writing and creativity, in addition to also using AI. Thank you. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you.